minus 64 degrees. At that temperature, spit freezes before it reaches the ground. Gasoline turns to jelly. Steel cracks like glass. And somewhere in northern Canada, in a tiny settlement on the shore of a frozen bay, a family of 5 sits in a house, and they are warm. Not just bearable, truly warm. Inside it is plus 20. Outside it is minus 64. A difference of 84 degrees. And not a single radiator, not a single heater, not a single wire from a power station. I stood in front of this house and could not understand how this was even possible. My name is... well, it does not matter what my name is. What matters is that I am a city person who freezes at minus 10 and considers it a catastrophe. I came north to see with my own eyes what they describe in survival textbooks, how the Inuit heat their dwellings, without gas, without electricity, without firewood, because there have been no trees here for the last several thousand years.
The nearest tree grows 800 kilometers to the south. Remember that number. 800 kilometers to the nearest stick. And here I am, 6 in the morning, darkness. The polar night had not released this land for the 3rd week already. The sun would not appear for another month. The sky was ink black, but not empty. The stars were so bright it seemed as though someone had poked thousands of holes in a black ceiling. The northern lights slowly rippled at the horizon, greenish, lazy, like a curtain in a draft. Cold. That is what I feel first of all. Not frost, but precisely cold. There is a difference. Frost nips, cold presses. It physically squeezes the chest. Air enters the lungs like sandpaper. Eyelashes stick together after 30 seconds. My 3 layers of thermal underwear, a down jacket costing $400, and a ski mask. All of this worked roughly like an umbrella in a tsunami. Tumak came out of the house in just a parka. A parka is a kind of jacket made of sealskin, fur side in. On his feet were kamiks, boots made of caribou hide. On his hands were mittens of bear fur. That was all. 3 items of clothing. He looked at me, at my 7 layers, at my shivering, and smiled. Without words. That smile said everything. Tumak is a man of about 50, a face like a map of this land, weathered, dark, with deep wrinkles that tell the story of every winter. Broad hands, thick fingers, as if nature had specifically engineered them for working in the cold. He is a hunter, a builder, an engineer, though he does not call himself that. He simply lives. But the way he lives is engineering of the highest order. Next to him stands Nanook, his son, about 25. Quieter than his father, quicker in his movements. He grew up between 2 worlds. He went south to study, saw cities, came back. He says it was colder in the city. At first I thought it was a metaphor. Then I realized it was not. In a city apartment with thin walls and drafts, he really was colder than here, in a house in the middle of the Arctic desert. We went inside, and right there I experienced for the first time the feeling that made it worth flying thousands of kilometers. Shock. Thermal shock in reverse. Outside it is minus 64. I open the door, which is not actually a door, but more on that later. I take 3 steps, and I find myself in warmth. Real, soft, enveloping warmth. As if someone had thrown a warm blanket not over the body, but over the air around it. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not smoke, not soot. A light, oily, slightly sweet aroma. As if someone had melted butter and added a pinch of something marine. It was seal blubber burning. A kulik, a stone lamp, stood on a low platform in the center of the room. A flat stone the size of a large frying pan, hollowed out to form a shallow bowl. In that bowl, melted seal blubber. Along the edge, a wick made of Arctic moss. The moss absorbs the fat and burns. Evenly, calmly, without soot. The flame is low, about 5 to 7 centimeters, but stretched along the entire length of the wick, which is about 40 centimeters. One such lamp. One.
It heated the entire space. I came closer, extended my hands toward the fire. The warmth was not like that from a campfire, not focused and scorching. It came evenly, softly, like from a good oil-filled radiator. Only without electricity, without metal, without factories. Stone, fat, moss. 3 components that are thousands of years old. Sikuana, Tumok's wife, tended the lamp. This, as I learned later, is traditionally a woman's task, and one of the most important in an Inuit household. She sat beside the kulik, and from time to time adjusted the wick with a special bone stick. She would nudge the moss a little here, lift it slightly there. The flame changed shape, height, intensity. She controlled the heat in the house, just as precisely as I controlled the thermostat in my apartment. Only my thermostat is digital, and hers is 30 years of experience and her fingertips. I asked if I could try. Sikuana nodded. I took the stick and tried to adjust the wick. The flame jerked, smoked, became uneven. The room instantly filled with a thin wisp of smoke. Sikuana gently took the stick from my hands, and with 3 movements restored everything as it was. A clean, even flame, without a single trace of smoke. She looked at me with the same expression a head chef gives someone who has oversalted the water for pasta. 1 kulik burns approximately 1.5 kilograms of seal blubber per day. That is not much. 1 seal yields 20 to 40 kilograms of fat, depending on size and season. That means 1 seal is 2 to 3 weeks of warmth. For an entire family. 20 seals, and you have survived the winter. Not just survived, but lived in warmth. That is Arctic mathematics, and it has been working for 4,000 years. But the kulik is only half the equation. Even the most efficient stove is useless if heat escapes through the walls. And this is where the second part of the genius begins. Architecture. Tumok led me outside to show the construction. I did not want to go out, at all. But I went out. And again that blow of cold, like a slap from the planet itself. We walked around the house in a circle. More precisely, not a house, an igloo. But not the igloo you have seen in cartoons, not a small snow dome with a penguin sitting inside. This is a serious engineering structure. The base diameter is about 4 meters. The height at the center is approximately 2.5 meters. The walls are 60 to 90 centimeters thick. The snow blocks are cut from dense, wind-compressed snow, not from loose snow. Loose snow will not do. You need precisely the snow that has lain under the wind for several weeks and turned into something between snow and ice. Tumok tests the snow with a knife. He plunges the blade in and listens to the sound. By the sound, he determines the density. That sound told me nothing. For him, it is like reading a label on building material. The blocks are cut with a special knife, a pana. The length of a block is about 60 centimeters, the height 40, the thickness 20. Each weighs approximately 15 kilograms. They are laid in a spiral, from bottom to top, tilting inward. Each successive row tilts slightly more toward the center. This is not simply a dome. It is a spiral vault. An engineering solution that European architects mastered in the Middle Ages, while the Inuit had been using it thousands of years earlier. Without textbooks, without calculations on paper, with hands and eyes. Tumok built this igloo in 2 hours, alone. Nanook helped, but mostly watched and passed blocks. 2 hours, and in the middle of an icy desert, a house appeared. I once assembled a wardrobe from a Swedish furniture store. It took 6 hours and cost me 1 friendship because the friend who helped no longer speaks to me. But it is not about speed. It is about why this works. Snow, as paradoxical as it sounds, is an excellent insulator. Inside a snow block are millions of tiny air pockets. Air is the worst conductor of heat. The wall of an igloo works like a thermos. It does not let heat out and does not let cold in. At minus 64 outside and a burning kulik inside, the temperature in the igloo rises to plus 15 to 20, a difference of 80 degrees, through a wall of snow. But there is something else. The entrance. This is what amazed me most of all. There is no entrance in the usual sense. There is a tunnel, long, low, sloping downward, about 2 meters long and less than a meter high. To enter, you must get on all fours and crawl. I asked Tumak why it was so inconvenient. He answered with one word: air. Warm air rises, cold air sinks. The tunnel entrance is below the level of the living chamber floor. This means that cold air, which is heavier, collects in the tunnel and cannot rise into the room, and warm air, which is lighter, stays up above inside the dome. The tunnel works like an airlock on a submarine, only made of snow, and invented 4,000 years ago. I crawled through this tunnel and felt the temperature change with every meter. At the entrance, -60. In the middle of the tunnel, -30. At the exit into the room, +15. 3 meters of distance, 90 degrees of difference. Inside the igloo, it smelled of warmth. Exactly that. Warmth. If you have never truly been cold, you will not understand how warmth can have a smell. But it does. Melted fat, dry fur, human breath. This smell means you are safe, that the night will not kill you. Sikuana was cooking food right over the kulik. Above the lamp hung a stone pot on a bone suspension. In the pot, snow was slowly melting, turning into water. This is yet another function of the lamp. It does not only heat, it melts snow for drinking, for cooking, for washing. It dries clothing. Wet kamiks hung above it on bone spreaders. It gives light. Soft, orange, alive. One object performs the functions of a furnace, a kitchen stove, a dryer, a water supply system, and a chandelier. Show me a modern appliance that does all of this simultaneously while consuming 1.5 kilograms of fuel per day. Nanook sat down beside me and began to talk. He spoke in English, slowly, choosing his words. He was explaining what was obvious to him but sounded to me like a lecture on thermodynamics. Inside the igloo, there is a system of levels. The floor is not flat, it is stepped. The lowest level is at the exit from the tunnel. This is the cold zone.
Meat is stored here. The catch is butchered here. The temperature is around 0. The middle level is the work zone. Here is the kulik. Here they cook, sew, repair gear. The temperature is +10 to 15. The upper level is the sleeping platform. It is raised 60 to 70 centimeters. Warm air accumulates right here. The temperature is +20 to 25. On this platform lie caribou hides, several layers, first side up, first side down. This is the bed. I touched it, softer than any mattress from a store, and warmer. 3 temperature zones in a single space, without partitions, without mechanisms, without electronics. Simply physics, gravity, and thousands of years of experience. I lay down on the platform. I was warm, truly warm. Outside was frost so severe that metal crumbles, and I lay on hides, and I was warm. This sensation is impossible to convey in words. It is not simply comfort. It is victory.
A victory of the human mind over an environment that kills everything alive. Tumak sat across from me and began carving something from bone. Just like that, in passing. His hands were never idle. He told me how he learned to build an igloo. His father showed him when he was 7. By 10, he had built his first one. Small, crooked. It collapsed after 2 days. His father did not scold him. He said one word. Again. By the age of 12, Tumak was building igloos that stood all winter. By 15, he could build one in a blizzard, nearly blind, navigating by wind and by touch. At 15, I could not find the key to the apartment in my own pocket. But the igloo is an emergency option. A temporary dwelling for hunting trips, for journeys, for a sudden blizzard when you need shelter right now. For permanent living, the Inuit built other houses. And about those I learned things that overturned my understanding of Arctic architecture. The winter house, a karmat, is a semi-subterranean dwelling. The foundation is dug into the ground, or rather into the permafrost, to a depth of about 1 meter. The walls are made of stones, whale bones, and sod. Yes, whale bones. The ribs of a bowhead whale, each up to 3 meters long, were used as rafters. They formed a frame that was then covered with hides and heaped with earth and snow. The wall thickness reached 1.5 meters. 1.5 meters of insulation. For comparison, the wall of a typical brick house in the temperate zone is 40 to 60 centimeters. The Inuit winter house is insulated 3 times better. And again, a tunnel entrance, longer than in an igloo, up to 5 meters, with turns. The turns are not for aesthetics. They block the wind. Arctic wind is not the breeze that ruffles your hair on the beach. It is a wall of moving air at speeds of up to 100 kilometers per hour that blows heat out of any crack in seconds.
A straight tunnel the wind would pierce right through. A curved tunnel reduces its energy to nothing. Inside the kharmat, the same principle of levels, but more space, and more kulaks. In a large house there could be 3 or 4 lamps, each under the care of one of the women of the family, each tuned to its own task. One for heating, another for cooking, a third for drying clothes, a fourth for light. Coordination among them is a whole art. Too much fire and the house becomes hot. The snow layer of insulation begins to thaw. Too little and the cold begins to seep in. Balance. Constant, minute-by-minute balance. Sikwana explained this to me through food. She was preparing seal meat. She cut it into thin strips and laid them on a flat stone above the kulak. Fat from the meat dripped back into the lamp. Zero waste production. The meat dried and was simultaneously smoked in the warmth of the lamp. She worked with an ulu knife, a semicircular woman's knife. The blade was of old metal, the handle of caribou antler. This knife had come to her from her mother, and to her mother from her grandmother. 3 generations of one blade. I have changed kitchen knives 4 times in the last 10 years. At night I woke from silence. Absolute, cosmic silence. No wind, no creaking, not a single sound. Only the breathing of sleeping people and the quiet crackling of the wick in the kulik. Sikuana was not asleep. She sat by the lamp adjusting the moss. In the middle of the night, I understood that someone keeps watch over the lamp at all times. The lamp must not go out. It is not merely a source of heat. It is life. If the lamp goes out at -60, you have several hours before the temperature inside drops to dangerous levels. Several hours is a lot, but also little, because relighting a kulik in that kind of cold is no simple task. The fat thickens, the moss dampens from condensation. Hands go numb. Therefore the lamp burns always. 24 hours a day. All winter. For months. In the morning, if you can call 6 hours of darkness morning, Nanook took me to see yet another heating system, one that requires neither lamp, nor fat, nor fire at all. Body heat. Inuit clothing is not simply protection from the cold. It is a thermoregulation system. 2 layers. The inner one, fur against the body. The outer one, fur facing out. Between them, an air gap. The same principle as in the walls of an igloo. Air as insulator. Caribou fur is hollow inside. Each hair is a tiny tube filled with air. Millions of microscopic thermoses. No synthetic material can replicate this. I checked. My $400 down jacket, remember? It gave up after 2 hours. Tumak's parka worked all day, without batteries. Nanook showed me how to dress properly. First, bare skin, no underwear. I was surprised. He explained. Any fabric absorbs sweat. Sweat freezes. Frozen sweat kills. Caribou fur does not absorb moisture. Sweat passes through the inner layer, enters the air gap, and evaporates. The body stays dry. A dry body is a warm body. A wet body is a dead body. A simple rule, deadly simple. Mittens of bear fur, enormous like boxing gloves. Inside they are roomy. The fingers move freely, warming each other. Kamiks, boots of caribou hide, with a lining of grass. Yes, grass.
a special Arctic grass that the women gather in summer and dry. It is placed inside the boot and works as an insole, absorbing moisture and creating additional insulation. Every evening the grass is removed and dried over the kulik. Every morning it is placed back in. A daily ritual. Like brushing your teeth, only the stakes are higher. Forget to change the grass and you get frostbitten toes. Lose your toes and you cannot hunt. Cannot hunt and there will be no seal blubber. No blubber and the lamp goes out. The lamp goes out. Well, you understand. Everything is connected. Every element depends on every other. Clothing depends on hunting. Hunting depends on tools. Tools depend on the working of bone and hide. Working depends on warmth in the house. Warmth depends on fat. Fat depends on hunting. A circle. A closed, perfect circle that has been turning for thousands of years. On the third day, Tumak took me seal hunting. Not for entertainment. For fat. For the lamp. For warmth. We went out onto the ice. White space to the horizon. No landmarks, no roads, no signs. Tumak walked confidently, as if following a navigator. His navigator was the direction of the wind, the shape of the snow ridges, the position of the stars. He read the ice the way I read a subway map. No, better. A subway map does not change. The ice changes every day. We reached a spot where Tumak stopped. He crouched, touched the ice with his hand, sniffed the air. I stood beside him and saw nothing. White ice, white snow, white sky. But he saw a breathing hole, an opening in the ice through which a seal rises to breathe. Tiny, about 10 centimeters in diameter, covered with snow. Invisible, but not to Tumak. He placed a thin bone indicator in the breathing hole, a feather on a stick. When the seal rises to breathe, the feather will stir. And then, one strike with the harpoon. But first you must wait. 1 hour. 2. 3. Motionless. At -50. Without movement, because the seal will hear. Without coughing, because the seal will hear. Without shifting from foot to foot, because the seal will feel the vibration through the ice. I lasted 40 minutes. Then my knees began to tremble. Then my feet lost all feeling. Then I coughed. Tumak did not even turn around, but I saw his shoulders twitch slightly. Perhaps from disappointment. Perhaps from suppressed laughter. He stood for 4 hours. 4 hours of immobility in the cold. Then the feather stirred. A strike. A seal. 80 kilograms of meat and fat. From that, fat Sikuana would feed the lamp for the next 3 weeks. 3 weeks of warmth. 4 hours of waiting for 3 weeks of warmth. That is the exchange rate. We hauled the seal back on a sled. A kamutik, light, made of bone and hide. The runners were coated with a thin layer of ice. Tumak built up the ice in a special way. He took water into his mouth, sprayed a thin layer onto the runners, let it freeze, repeated. 7 or 8 layers. Icy runners glide over snow with almost no friction. Arctic Teflon. In the evening, we returned. Smoke. No, not smoke. Steam. Warm steam rose from the ventilation hole in the roof. A small opening, the size of a fist. Yet another element of the system. Without ventilation, the kulik would consume all the oxygen in the sealed space. People would suffocate. The opening lets in fresh air and releases combustion byproducts. But it is not too large so as not to lose heat. The size of the opening is regulated with a snow plug. More people inside. Larger opening. Fewer people. Smaller. Manual ventilation. Primitive? No. Precise. Sikuana met us at the entrance to the tunnel. Nanook was already butchering the seal inside, on the lower level. The cold zone, remember? Meat does not spoil at 0 degrees, but hands do not go numb either, as they would outside. The ideal working temperature. Fat was carefully trimmed and placed into stone containers. This fat is the currency of the Arctic. Warmth, light, food, all in one piece of white blubber. I sat on the sleeping platform, wrapped in a hide, and watched the family work. Everyone knew their role. Every movement had purpose. Not a single wasted gesture. Nanook butchered. Sikuana sorted the fat and added it to the kulik. Tumak repaired the harpoon, preparing for the next hunt. A little granddaughter, about 5 years old, carried pieces of meat to the drying rack above the lamp, and periodically popped pieces into her own mouth.
A universal childhood skill, independent of latitude. I thought about my home, about the thermostat on the wall, about the gas pipe that comes from somewhere underground, from some deposit thousands of kilometers away, about the power plant that burns coal or splits the atom so that I can press a button and get heat. How many links are in this chain? How many people, machines, pipes, wires stand between me and my warmth? Hundreds, thousands. If one link breaks, I freeze and cannot do anything. I call the emergency service and wait. But here the chain is short. Seal, fat, lamp, heat. 4 links. If something breaks, you fix it yourself. With your own hands. Right now. Because there is no one to wait for. There is no emergency service here. Here you are the emergency service. Before sleep, Tumak said a phrase to me that I will remember for the rest of my life. He said, "Cold is not an enemy. Cold is a teacher. A bad student freezes. A good student builds a house." I lay on the hides, in warmth, in a snow house in the middle of an icy desert, and thought about how civilization is not skyscrapers and smartphones. Civilization is when a person takes what is around and makes a life out of it. Snow, fat, bones, fur. 4 materials, thousands of years, and plus 20 at minus 64. The lamp burned quietly. Sikuana adjusted the wick without opening her eyes, a habit that had grown into her body over 30 years. The flame evened out. The warmth remained. If this story made you think about what we have forgotten, subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories ahead about people who know things that we do not. Write in the comments what surprised you the most. I am truly curious.